So what's going to happen is you're going to have almost like an exodus of all these individuals that are in Canada on work permits who are going to have to leave, or they can't stay in the country with work permits at least.
Today on True Patriot Love, I have Nir Rozenberg, a friend of the show, back to talk about LMIAs. So Nir, welcome back.
Thank you so much for having me again.
Yeah. So you and I had an offline conversation about LMIAs about 2 weeks ago, and I left and my jaw dropped. And, I asked you the question. I said, what was the LMIA program supposed to do, and how far did the system go adrift? So let's start with the first question. LMIAs, for people out there who are not familiar with the LMIA system, what was it put in place to do, and when kind of approximately was the program started, and what did the government really want it to achieve?
Yeah, so first of all, I think the program began well before my time being an immigration consultant. I've been doing this for about 20 years. It's been around for a lot longer than that. There's a department in Canada called Employment Skills Development, ESDC, Employment Skills Development Canada. And what they do is a part of their there's a division in there for temporary foreign workers. So what they do is they assess essentially the labor market. So prior to when I became an immigration consultant, this used to be called a labor market opinion. Employers would submit an application. It used to be a 2-page application, very simple, explaining what they're looking for, why they can't fill a particular a position, and there were no advertising requirements. It was fairly simple to do. You basically explain what you're looking for, why you need to fill a position, that you can't find a local Canadian citizen or permanent resident to fill the job, or there are specific skills that you're missing, and you're identifying a foreign worker to fill the position. And you're requesting ESDC to assess the labor market to determine whether that position is going to be a positive, neutral, or negative effect by filling it with a foreign national, whether that's going to be a positive, neutral, or negative effect to the Canadian labor market. It used to be called a labor market opinion. So they used to give this opinion that said, this is a positive effect on the labor market or negative. And with an approval, or with this positive opinion, an employer could then go and hire a foreign worker. A foreign worker could then submit an application for a temporary work permit. Over the years, the government's made some changes to this program, and they essentially also changed the name of it. So it is a labor market impact assessment, and it's now a little bit more accurate to the labor market. So they're looking at labor market conditions. It's a much more in-depth application these days, and the department assesses the labor market conditions to determine whether or not, again, this position is going to have that positive, neutral, or negative effect on the labor market. With a positive effect, they will issue a labor market impact assessment approval, and then the foreign worker could then apply for a work permit. So this has been years. This has been for decades. But the way they run the program kind of changes with the times and with the economy and with what the labor market conditions look like, and in different provinces and in different cities.
Right. Right. And the program, so if I understand it correctly, the LMIA program is not canceled, but they've now adjusted it, or they've restricted it heavily. So if I'm an employer now, I have kind of new rules. If I'm a worker, I see a new world in front of me. But does it feel practically like a ban at this point? Like, is it starting to feel? Because, when you and I had our conversation, we were talking about some of the challenges of different businesses. And then right after we had the conversation, companies like Tim Hortons came out, and they're basically saying now, they're going to stop using the temporary foreign workers program. They're going to start hiring locally again. So talk to me a little bit about sort of, the challenges you're seeing on the ground. Is it practically a ban?
So it's not necessarily, a ban, but it kind of looks like one. and it almost feels like one. What they've done is September of 2024, they realized the unemployment rate is way too high in the country, across the nation. And what they did was they started cutting back. And what they're doing is they're, in order to achieve their goals, and we've had conversations about the government's immigration goals in last episodes with Phil Mooney and myself, where the government is trying to cut back on the number of foreign workers that are essentially coming in. So there's a lot of individuals today in Canada with work permits that are set to expire, about 1.3 million that are going to expire this year of 2026. What the government is trying to do is they're trying to avoid bringing in more foreign workers. Essentially, they're responding to labor market conditions. Whether it's the right way to do it or not, that's a different topic. But what they're doing is they're essentially cutting back. As of September of 2024, any employer in a region in the country that is experiencing 6% or more unemployment rate is in an area where there is what they call refusal to process policy in place. And what that means is you can't apply as an employer. You just can't. Not unless you're putting what's called a high wage application. So the government of Canada created a threshold. For example, in Ontario, it's, I believe, $36 an hour. Anything above 36 or above an hour allows you to submit an application. It's called a high wage application, and you can submit that for a chef, a cook, a truck driver, whatever. As long as it is a high wage application, you can apply. With low wage applications, you are capped at 10% of your workforce, which has been around for a little while now. It used to be 15, it used to be 20%, it went down to 15%, and now they're down to 10. And what they've done is they've also applied that 6% rule. So if you are in a region that has 6% or more unemployment rate, which is in fact nearly the entire country, there's very, very specific areas that in the country that are not 6%, they're a little bit less than that. And that those are the regions where you can apply for a low wage position. Now, there's a lot of employers in Canada that are struggling to find workers or retain workers. And remember that the 1.3 million work permits that are set to expire in 2026, those are individuals that are working in low wage positions, a lot in the food sector, a lot in the construction industry. Those individuals may or may not be able to renew work permits. Those employers may or may not be able to retain those workers. So what's going to happen is you're going to have almost like an exodus of all these individuals that are in Canada on work permits who are going to have to leave, or they can't stay in the country with work permits at least. So the government is responding to the labor market conditions. Again, whether or not that is the proper way to do it or the way that they're essentially blanketing low wage applications is it could be another topic for discussion, because what they're expecting is to bring down the temporary foreign worker or the temporary resident percentage to under 5% by 2027. So that means they're just not accepting applications. They're making it very, very difficult for employers to hire foreign workers, even in high wage applications. We're finding that employers in high wage applications that are paying $45 an hour to individuals that they need to retain, they can't. I've got clients that are stuck getting refusals on LMI applications that we're working very hard to convince ESDC of the need for these individuals. And ESDC says, no, we're refusing this, because they're just essentially looking, it's coming from the top. They're basically, the way we see it is that it's coming from the top. They're basically saying, try to find any reason to refuse employers, try to find any reason. And again, even if you had an LMI as an employer, a work permit is a separate application. We're seeing employers get approvals on LMIAs and then refusals on work permits. So
Ooh.
they're getting approved on LMIAs to bring in the foreign workers, and then IRCC, which is Immigration Refugees Canada, is the Department for Immigration, is actually refusing the work permits, and we're finding them providing unreasonable reasons for refusal that are not, that are not very reasonable. They'll find almost any reason we find today that they're refusing these work permits, and then employers are stuck. They're spending thousands of dollars getting LMIAs approved. Finally, you get the approval, and then work permits are getting denied. So they're just